Today, brothers and sisters, I bring you news that will reverberate from the bustling markets of Ouagadougou to the skyscrapers of Beijing, from the gold-rich hills of to the harbors of Shanghai, from the trembling corridors of power in Washington, London, and Paris to the humble fields where African farmers tend their crops in the morning sun. The story before us is not just a headline, it is a tidal wave of history, roaring forward with unstoppable force. Burkina Faso and the People's Republic of China have just signed a deal so monumental, so shattering to the old order, that it threatens to completely dismantle the last decaying pillars of Western dominance on African soil. Let me repeat this, so that no one misunderstands. This is not just about trade, not just about cooperation, not just about friendship. This is a strategic, calculated, unapologetic alliance with one mission: to wipe the colonial fingerprints off the map of Africa forever. To close the chapter on centuries of plunder, humiliation, and subjugation. To replace dependency with dignity, manipulation with mutual benefit, and theft with fair exchange. And as I stand before you, I can tell you with every fiber of my being that the West has already begun to panic. The headlines in Paris are whispered through clenched teeth. The meetings in Brussels are no longer about innovation or development, they are about survival. The whispers in Washington are laced with desperation. Because they know what this means. Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation once dismissed by colonial cartographers as a backwater, has now become the epicenter of a new world alignment. I want you to picture this moment. Captain Ibrahim, the young lion of West Africa, standing beside the Chinese delegation in Ouagadougou, the flags of both nations fluttering under the African sun. Cameras flash, hands shake, signatures are inked, but behind those simple motions lies a tectonic shiftery writing of power. This deal is not measured in mere billions of dollars. It is measured in the collapse of centuries-old monopolies. It is measured in the erosion of Western control over African markets, resources, and political destinies. Now you may ask, what exactly is in this deal? Let me tell you, the details are like a spear aimed at the heart of Western economic supremacy. China has agreed to invest in Burkina Faso's industrial, agricultural, and technological infrastructure on a scale never before seen in the nation's history. We are talking about the full modernization of manufacturing plants, a transformation of rural farming into high-yield export-driven agribusiness. The construction of solar mega farms to power not only Burkina Faso but neighboring states, and perhaps most importantly, the establishment of secure independent trade corridors that bypass Western-controlled shipping lanes entirely. No more shall Burkina Faso be forced to beg for aid with strings attached. No more shall our farmers be cheated by Western intermediaries who buy our produce for cents and sell it back to us for fortunes. No more shall our young engineers and scientists be told to work in foreign labs while our homeland stagnates, and the West knows exactly why this terrifies them. Because when Burkina Faso succeeds, it will light a fire under the feet of every African nation still trapped in the neo-colonial web, if a landlocked nation with no coastline, no so-called strategic advantage in Western eyes, can rise to this level of economic independence. What excuse will they have left to keep others down? France, oh France, your hands tremble. For decades, you bled Burkina Faso through the CFA franc, a currency designed not for our prosperity but for your control. You installed leaders who bowed to your will, siphoned our gold, drained our resources, and called it partnership. You thought your language and your flags would be chains, strong enough to bind us forever. But today those chains are breaking, and America, Britain? You who pretend to be champions of democracy while building empires from the bones of other peoples, this deal bypasses your systems, your banks, your trade routes. You cannot sanction it without sanctioning China itself, and China is not Libya. China is not Iraq. China is not a nation you can simply destabilize with a wave of your intelligence agencies. You cannot invade it under the guise of liberation. You cannot lecture it into submission. The reality is simple. The balance of power is tilting, and it is tilting away from the West. But let us not forget, this is not a one-sided love story. China sees in Burkina Faso not just resources, but resilience. Not just markets, but a people ready to rise. For too long, the narrative has been that Africa must catch up to the rest of the world, as if we were children stumbling behind our elders. But in reality, we were shackled, held back deliberately, our natural wealth extracted to feed foreign machines. Now, the machine is being dismantled piece by piece, and Africa is building its own. What makes this deal even more devastating to Western interests is the mutual respect enshrined in its terms. China will not dictate policy, install puppet leaders, or demand that Burkina Faso adopt foreign values. Instead, it will build side by side, investing in roads, railways, ports in neighboring countries to ensure Burkina Faso's goods flow freely. It will finance universities focused on African innovation, not Western imitation. It will set up factories where hands control the levers, minds design the products, and families reap the rewards. I want you to feel the magnitude of this. For the first time in modern history, a major power is entering Africa not to plunder, but to partner. And that partnership is so threatening to the West because it exposes the lie they've told for generations that Africa cannot thrive without them. Listen carefully. The West's power over Africa was never about help. It was about dependency. Remove the dependency, and the empire collapses. And so, my brothers and sisters, the ink on this deal is more than ink, it is the blood of the old world order drying on the parchment of history. It is the funeral notice of a system that fed on African poverty to maintain Western wealth. It is a declaration that we will no longer trade our diamonds for glass beads, our oil for empty promises, our gold for green paper backed by nothing but arrogance. As we speak, think tanks in Paris are scrambling to predict the ripple effects. Defense departments in Washington are drafting new strategies. Economists in London are rewriting forecasts. They all know the truth. If Africa rises on its own terms, if Burkina Faso becomes the model of a truly sovereign African economy, the West will have no place left to extract, no way left to control. The question is no longer whether the West will fall in Africa, it is how fast. And to those who doubt, to those who think this is just political theater, I say, watch the ports being built, watch the power grids light up villages that have been in darkness for decades, watch the harvest yields double. Watch the GDP curve bend upward until it leaves Western aid irrelevant. Watch and understand that this is the dawn of something the West cannot reverse. We are entering an age where Africa's destiny is forged in African hands, with partners who treat us as equals, not pawns. Burkina Faso and China have set the example. Now the rest of Africa must decide, will we follow the path of sovereignty, or will we remain chained to the crumbling throne of Western influence? This is not just a deal. This is not just history. This is a warning shot, and the West has heard it loud and clear.
Welcome to Talk of Africa 360, your source for insightful news, analysis, and thoughtful commentary. If you value informed perspectives and fact-based reporting, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is based on reliable public sources and credible online information. It is intended strictly for educational and analytical purposes. We do not promote or endorse political violence, hate speech, or any form of discrimination. Our goal is to inform, not to inflame. Thanks for being here. Let's stay informed together.
Good evening, Africa. Good evening, world. This is not just another broadcast. This is the story that will shake the very foundations of global politics. I urge you to listen carefully, for what I am about to reveal is not simply a development. It is a seismic shift, an earthquake in the balance of world power. As I speak to you tonight, a quiet but unstoppable storm is forming in the heart of West Africa, and its epicenter is Burkina Faso. But this storm does not come alone. It arrives arm in arm with the red dragon of the East, China. Together, these two forces have set in motion a pact that the West neither anticipated nor can easily contain. A pact so bold, so strategic, that it threatens to wipe away centuries of Western dominance in Africa and beyond. The story begins not in the grand halls of power, but in the grit and heat of Ouagadougou, where whispers of a meeting between Captain Ibrahim Traore and high-ranking Chinese envoys began to circulate months ago. At first, the West dismissed it, a mere courtesy call, they thought. But those of us who have been paying attention know better. This was no ordinary diplomatic exchange. It was the laying of the first stone in a road that now stretches directly to the gates of Western hegemony. I have spoken to sources close to both governments, individuals who risked everything to give me the truth, and what they have revealed is nothing short of extraordinary. Imagine, if you will, a deal that bypasses every Western chokehold on African economies. A deal that renders obsolete the dollar-based system that has, for decades, been the chain around Africa's neck. The West has relied on its control over currency, over trade routes, over global institutions like the IMF and World Bank to keep Africa in perpetual dependency. But Captain Traore, with the precision of a military strategist and the vision of a revolutionary, has seen the cracks in this system, and with China's technological and financial muscle, he plans to blast those cracks wide open. The deal, now known among insiders as the Ouagadougou Accord, is not just about trade. It is about sovereignty, industry, and the rewriting of global economic rules. Under this pact, Burkina Faso will become the central hub for a new Pan-African industrial network, financed and equipped by China, but owned and run by Africans. From manufacturing plants to advanced agriculture, from renewable energy grids to military technology, every sector is being targeted for transformation. And here is the part that truly terrifies the West. The entire system will operate outside the dollar. Transactions will be settled in the Chinese yuan and the newly proposed African gold dinar, a currency backed not by empty promises, but by Africa's own vast mineral wealth. Some will say, but why Burkina Faso? Why not Nigeria, South Africa, or Egypt? The answer is as clear as it is strategic. Burkina Faso has no deep entanglement with Western corporations that would make such a transition impossible. It has a leader untainted by decades of political compromise. It sits geographically at a crossroads, capable of linking West, Central, and even parts of North Africa through its growing network of railways and trade routes. And perhaps most importantly, it has a leader who does not fear Western retaliation. Captain Ibrahim Traore has already stared down the so-called giants of the West and refused to bow. China, for its part, has moved with calculated subtlety. This is not the old model of debt-trap diplomacy the West likes to accuse them of. This is a partnership, pure and simple. China gains a loyal strategic ally in the heart of Africa, access to resources without the endless exploitation Western corporations have perfected, and a foothold in a region where American and European influence is crumbling. In return, Burkina Faso gains the machinery, technology, and capital to ignite an African industrial revolution, one that does not depend on Western approval. But it is not just economics at play here. No, the implications stretch into the realms of security and geopolitics. My sources have confirmed that part of the Ouagadougou Accord includes advanced Chinese military training for Burkina Faso, forces the establishment of a joint space research center. And, perhaps most shockingly, the construction of an encrypted African communications network that will be completely inaccessible to Western intelligence agencies. For decades, African leaders have known that their so-called secure communications were anything but secure. The CIA, MI6, DGSE, all have had their eyes and ears deep in African political affairs. But now, with Chinese encryption and African oversight, those days may be coming to an abrupt end. Already, the West is showing signs of panic. A confidential report from Brussels, leaked to my desk just 48 hours ago, describes the deal as the most significant challenge to Western influence in Africa since the decolonization wave of the 1960s. Washington, too, has taken notice. I have it on good authority that the U.S. State Department has summoned its ambassadors across West Africa to assess the threat and develop countermeasures. But what countermeasures can they possibly devise? Sanctions? Burkina Faso's new trade partners will be immune to them. Military intervention? In this climate, any such move would ignite a continental backlash that could unite Africa against the West once and for all. And here is the part that truly unsettles the Western elite. This is not just a Burkina Faso-China project. As news of the deal has quietly spread among African capitals, leaders from Mali, Niger, Guinea, and even parts of East Africa have begun signaling their interest in joining. It is the domino effect the West has always feared, an African economic bloc, independent of their financial systems, fortified by alliances with Eastern powers, and protected by leaders unafraid to speak the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, this is not merely a geopolitical shift. This is the start of a great unshackling. For the first time in modern history, Africa is not asking permission. It is not negotiating for scraps at the table of Western wealth. It is building its own table, setting its own rules, and inviting the world to join on African terms. The significance of that cannot be overstated. But let us be clear, this will not be a smooth path. The West will not stand by quietly while centuries of control slip through their fingers. They will smear, they will sabotage, they will attempt to divide African nations against each other. They will whisper of coups, of regime change, of humanitarian interventions. We have seen their playbook before. But this time, the ground is shifting under their feet, and the old tricks may not work. Captain Traore and his Chinese counterparts have anticipated these moves, and they are ready. In the coming weeks, factories will break ground in Burkina Faso. Cargo ships laden with industrial machinery will arrive at African ports under agreements the West has no power to block. Rail lines are being laid to connect landlocked nations directly to trade routes that circumvent traditional Western-controlled ports. And the most revolutionary aspect of all, an African digital commerce network, will begin testing, allowing African businesses to trade across borders instantly, without the interference of Western banks. I can tell you this. The world you knew yesterday is not the world you will wake up to tomorrow. A page is turning, and the West's chapter in Africa is ending far sooner than they ever imagined. And when this story is written in the history books, it will not speak of Western decline as an accident. It will speak of African and Eastern strategy as the decisive blow. In the villages, elders speak of a new dawn. In the cities, youth movements organize to protect the gains of this alliance. Farmers anticipate access to modern tools and techniques, freeing them from the endless cycle of low-yield harvests. Teachers prepare to integrate new technologies into classrooms. Entrepreneurs envision startups that will operate on a continental scale. The energy is palpable, and it is contagious. Meanwhile, in Western think tanks, analysts are beginning to whisper the unthinkable, that Africa, long treated as a pawn on the chessboard of global politics, might now be moving as a queen dictating the pace and direction of the game. They are beginning to accept, reluctantly, that sanctions may not work, that propaganda may fall flat, and that military threats may ignite more unity than fear. The realization is dawning that the era of unilateral Western dominance is not in decline, it is in free fall. And so, the question becomes, what will the West do? Will they adapt to a multipolar world where Africa is an equal player, or will they cling to the crumbling walls of their old empire? Will they choose partnership over domination, respect over exploitation? Or will they continue to dig their heels into the quicksand of history, sinking deeper with every attempt to maintain control? The answers will determine not just the future of Africa, but the future of the entire world. For now, the streets of Ouagadougou are quiet under the night sky, but the quiet is not of fear. It is the calm before a storm of progress. Cargo ships loaded with the machinery of change are on the move. Agreements are being signed across African capitals. Skilled hands are preparing to shape steel, plant seeds, lay tracks, and build networks. And somewhere in a modest government office, Captain Ibrahim Traore and his team are finalizing the next phase of a plan that could redefine the destiny of a continent. To the west, this alliance between Burkina Faso and China may seem like a threat. To Africa, it is a promise. A promise that the future will not be dictated by those who see the continent as a mine, a market, or a military base. A promise that the decisions made in African capitals will serve African people first. A promise that the wealth beneath African soil will feed African dreams before it fills foreign vaults. This is not the destruction of order, it is the birth of justice. And as this chapter of history unfolds, one truth will remain unshakable. The power of a people united in purpose is greater than any empire built on exploitation. The West may try to rewrite the story, but the pen is now in African hands, and the ink flows with the confidence of a continent that has found its voice.
As reactions continue to pour in from across the continent, one thing is clear. Africa is demanding respect, sovereignty, and accountability. Was this just a diplomatic misstep or a deeper sign of shifting global alliances? We'll be watching closely. If you found this story important, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, unfiltered African news. This is Talk of Africa 360, telling the stories that matter.